Hi ladies, I hope this is working. My name's Alicia with SleepWell Baby and I'm a child sleep consultant. I'm so excited to be here today to get to answer some of your questions. Hopefully get you sleeping a little better by the end of it. So I want to thank everyone that submitted questions in the group. I was actually a little overwhelmed at the response. There's a lot of tired mamas in this group, and I've been where you are. I know how tough it can be, but hopefully we'll send you off with some tips today so that you can get a little more rest in the future. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to answer each question individually, but there were definitely some common trends with the questions that I'll try to speak to hopefully get as many answers as possible for you. So we'll get right started. The first question that seemed to pop up a lot had to do with naps, and in particular short naps. So it's really important when with our babies that we're not letting them become overtired. Because when they become overtired, their bodies produce cortisol and adrenaline, which are stress hormones, and it can make it really difficult for them to settle. It can make them feel uncomfortable, and it can make it harder for them to stay asleep or to consolidate their sleep cycles. And so with short naps, they're quite often lasting around that 30 to 45 or 50 minutes long. And that is typically the length of a baby's sleep cycle. So when they're only napping for that long, it's typically because they're not able to consolidate their sleep cycles and extend that nap. So I'm going to try and give you a few tips that you can use to work on extending those naps. The first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that we have our babies napping at the right time. So babies under 6 months, we nap according to awake time. So if you have a baby that is around 4 months old, they can probably withstand around 2 hours of awake time. And this is just a guideline. Not every baby is going to fall exactly into that. You'll want to watch for tired cues or sleepy cues if your baby is yawning or rubbing their eyes or zoning out or that sort of thing. It can also be an indication that they are getting tired, and you should be getting them to nap again. So if you want to check out my Facebook page, I shared a graphic on there a couple weeks ago that lists all the awake times for each age under 6 months. So you can take a peek at that and save it or share it or keep it for reference. With babies older than 6 months, we nap them on the clock because they're able to withstand a little bit longer of awake time. So we like to recommend the morning nap falling around 9:15 or 9:30, and then the afternoon nap around 1:30 or 1:45. And we like these times because babies this age have a melatonin increase around these windows. So if we can start their nap around these times, they're going to fall asleep a little easier, and they're also going to have a more restorative or restful nap. For babies on the younger end of this, they may need a third nap some days or every day. Usually by about 8 months they've transitioned away from the third nap. But this third nap is just it's a late afternoon cat nap. It's just bridging the gap until bedtime. There's not really any restorative value in it. So if you have an option between going to bed early or giving them a third nap, I would always recommend going with the early bedtime because that sleep is much more restorative for them. And then we recommend that bedtime fall around between 6 and 7. It's really good if you can keep bedtime floating so that we can adjust the bedtime depending on the quality of their daytime sleep, or if they've got a lot going on developmentally or just a really stimulating day, you can bump bedtime earlier. But if they've had a good nap day and it's just a regular day, then maybe closer to 7 would be more appropriate for them. And then our little ones that are down to 1 nap, which usually happens around 14 or 15 months. It's different for every baby, but usually that's a pretty good guideline around there. So they're going to want their 1 nap to fall around 12:30. If it's a new transition where they've just kind of cut down to 1 nap, they might be taking it closer to 12 o'clock. And if they're a bit on the older side, then they might be going down around 1 o'clock. But somewhere around that 12:30 is the best time for a really good restorative afternoon nap. I hope this is working. I feel like I'm just talking to myself. If there's anyone watching, do you want to give a thumbs up so I know that it's working and you're out there? Another tip when it comes to naps is that we want them to be going down awake or falling asleep on their own for them. If they are, thanks Anna, if they're going to sleep on their own, when they wake prematurely from their nap or too early, they're going to be able to put themselves back to sleep on their own if that's how they went to sleep initially. And then we also want to give them a bit of time after they wake up so that we give them a chance to fall back asleep in case they're not finished. Quite often when we get them up after that short nap, they're groggy and they're fussy and they're not really happy. They're not ready to be awake. So if we can give them a little bit of space and some time just to try and work on consolidating those sleep cycles, it can be helpful. I know it feels like when your baby's crying, it feels way longer than it actually is. So sometimes it's a good idea to set the kitchen timer. And if you can set it for 15 minutes when they wake up too early and wait that long to see, that's a really good opportunity for them to fall asleep. If you're not comfortable with that long, or if baby's a little bit younger, then you can just start with 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever you're comfortable with. But just to give them that opportunity to fall back asleep on their own. And then another piece for naps is that we want the environment to be conducive for sleep. So this is true with sleep for anyone, even us adults. We want to have the room really, really dark. We want it to be like pitch black. I don't want to see any light. A really dark room helps with our melatonin production. So if we can use that to our favor, it's going to help with sleep. That melatonin is that sleepy hormone. So baby's going to fall asleep and stay asleep if their melatonin production is doing what it should. There's lots of options for getting things really dark. You can use blackout blinds. You can do black construction paper over the window or garbage bags or tin foil. It doesn't have to be fancy. We just want to do whatever we can to block out that light. And then also with the lights, sometimes the monitors or the humidifier or that sort of thing will have a bright, like a green or a blue or a red light on it. And for our more sensitive babies, that can actually be really disruptive for their sleep. So if you just stick a little bit of tape over it, that can be helpful sometimes. Some babies, it's not a big deal at all, but for some, it definitely does make a difference. Sorry, just reading a question here. The ideal sleep times for a 2-napper is around 9:15 or 9:30, and then around 1:30 or 1:45. And so that's assuming that we have an awake time in the morning around 7 and a bedtime around 7. All right, so back to sleep environment. We also really recommend using white noise. White noise, some of you may have heard that it's kind of like considered a sleep prop, or it's something that you're going to have to wean from your baby. And we really don't think of it that way. We think of it more as an insurance policy. So if you get your baby to sleep, why risk the doorbell ringing or their brother or sister or just traffic or anything like that waking them early? So white noise can be really helpful just to drown out those other environmental sounds. We like the white noise to be pure, so not ocean waves or music or rainforest or that sort of thing. We want it to be a constant pitch. When it's a different pitch, it can be stimulating, and then if baby is in one of the lighter stages of sleep or between sleep cycles, it can actually cause a wake. So that's why we recommend just a pure, constant white noise, and we want it to go for the whole duration of sleep, so we don't want it shutting off on a timer. There's a few options for that. You can buy a white noise machine, or you can just download an app on your iPhone or an old tablet and use that. And then a fan also works really great. If it's a little bit cooler, just point it at the wall so it's not blowing on the baby, and it can help to drown out some of those noises. We also want the room to be a little bit on the cool side, not cold, but darkness and coolness can all help with melatonin production. And then the last piece for environment is we want the room to be boring, or we want their crib to be boring. We don't want it to be stimulating, like if there's a mobile or anything glowing or toys or that sort of thing. It can be really distracting for them when they're trying to go to sleep or when they're trying to go back to sleep. So it's important that we keep the distractions to a minimum so they don't get straying from what they're supposed to be doing in there. And so that's the main things that I could think of for naps to hopefully help with extending them for some of you. Hopefully we get them at the right times, and then giving them a chance to work on it and extend it on their own can be really, really helpful. The environment can also, keeping the room really dark, can also help if you have a baby that tends to rise too early. If the sun's shining and they think it's time to wake up, darkening the room can be a big game changer for that too. And so another question that came up a lot was around removing night feeds. So this one is a trickier question to answer in a live chat because there's a lot of variables around removing night feeds. At SleepWell Baby, when we work with a family, we spend a lot of time together with them, getting to know them, getting to know their parenting style, their child's temperament, just their unique needs in order to make a customized approach or plan for them. So it's really tough without a lot of specific information to make recommendations on it. So I'm going to try and give some really general information, and hopefully we can work on that. We have a 6 a.m. riser here, even with the darkening shades. That's a tricky one to tackle. Sometimes one of the main components that you want to look at is what time bedtime is. It sounds backwards, and it was kind of a tough sell for me at first, but a lot of the time bedtime is too late, and that's what's causing the early rise. Some babies are just programmed that way, and 6 a.m. is their morning time. But we do have a really good article on our website, www.sleepwellbaby.ca, and I'll post it in the comments after, that talks about early rising and the different things you can try for that. But moving bedtime earlier, depending on when that's happening, can be helpful, or just playing with bedtime is probably the next step, but the article goes into it in a little more detail if you want to check that out. So back to removing night feeds. So this is just really general. It depends on a lot of things. But if your baby is 6 months old, if they're at a healthy weight, and if they've been matching their growth curve as expected, then technically they're capable of going about 12 hours at night with no feed. So obviously that depends on your comfort level. If you're nursing and have had supply issues, that's something that comes into play. There's a lot of things that factor in. And you may want to talk to your pediatrician before you take the plunge and remove the night feeds, just to get some reassurance that there's no concerns there. Babies are really good at consolidating their calories over 24 hours. So if your baby's eating at night and you remove the feeds, then they will make up for those feeds during the day. Oh, we've tried all times and there's no luck. There's another, I would recommend pick your awake time and don't go in and get her before that time, just to try and teach her what appropriate time is. It can be tricky. I'm not sure how old she is. And then there is in that article they talk about a technique that is successful sometimes. It's not a really common one, but where you just wake baby before they're typically waking up, just to kind of switch up those sleep cycles and the stages of sleep a little bit. And so that can sometimes help, but it's not a common one. But sorry, I'm getting distracted here. So with removing the night feeds, where was I? So if you decide that you want to do that, and this is typical with removing night feeds or removing a soother or that sort of thing. If you decide to go ahead and do that, you want to make a plan or decide on a method that you are going to use to respond to their wakes instead of feeding them or instead of putting their soother back in or that sort of thing. So if you want support or help, I would be more than happy to help you. It's hard to go into specifics here. But if you decide you want that support, you can check out the services available on their website, and they go into a bit more detail. And we can definitely help you to develop a customized approach that's going to work really great for your family. If you're going ahead on your own, you want to make sure that you're super consistent with your response, because the more consistent you are, the quicker baby is going to learn, and the sooner you're going to see results. So that's my suggestion there. It's a kind of a tricky one, but so another thing that was coming up quite often in the questions was around the crib to bed transition. So we recommend waiting to move your little one into a big bed until around 3 years old. We want them to be able to comprehend all of the rules and the expectations that come with having that new freedom, because it's a lot of freedom for someone that was in a crib before. A lot of the time there's already some sleep struggles or some issues that you're having, and you think that moving into a big bed might help with them. And then, unfortunately, that's usually not the case. Quite often it just leads to more problems, because they don't have those guidelines or the same boundaries that they did with the crib. So a common reason for moving out of the crib early is because of a little one that can climb out of the crib. So we do have a few little hacks that can sometimes help with that. One thing we recommend is using a sleep sack. And I really love sleep sacks for a lot of reasons. But one of them is because for an older baby that is trying to climb out of their crib, if they're in a sleep sack, they can't get the leg extension that they need to climb out of the crib. So sometimes that can help with it. If they've figured out how to get out of their sleep sack on their own, sometimes it can be helpful just to turn it around so they can't reach the zipper on the back or that sort of thing. Another thing to look at is to make sure that your crib is at the absolute lowest setting. It's kind of an obvious one, but sometimes there is another lower setting that it could get moved down to. And we also want to make sure that it's empty. We don't want pillow or bumpers or that sort of thing, they can just add leverage so they can climb out of the crib. So, and then another thing you can do, if your crib has kind of a headboard that's higher on one side, that's usually against the wall, you can flip it around so that the higher edge is outside and the lower edge is against the wall, so that it adds a little bit of height for them to get past. And then finally, if none of that has helped, you want to catch them in the act, so a video monitor can be really helpful with that, and just give them a firm no, and then silently return them into their crib, and then keep doing that. You don't want to interact with them or give them any payoff for that behavior. You just want to put them back in the crib and try to discourage that from happening. And if you try all that and they're still being a monkey and you can't keep them in and it's just not safe to, then for sure you'll move them into the bigger bed. And so around the time that you usually move from a crib to a big bed, this is sometimes also the time when they stop napping, which is super devastating. So around that usually happens somewhere around 2.5 to 3.5 or 4 even. And it can be really sad for us moms who are used to having that time for all kinds of things, if we want to get things done or shower or nap or whatever. We recommend teaching them how to do quiet time. So quiet time is just a period in the afternoon where they still go in their room, but they don't have to sleep. You can set out some specific toys for quiet time, but then their bed is there too, so if they happen to get tired and lay down and fall asleep, then that's okay. So then by using quiet time, then if you have younger siblings that are napping at that time, you're still getting a break, and they're still getting some downtime in their day too. So we have an article on our website, if you just go to the journal and search in how to teach quiet time, that'll walk you through how to set up doing quiet time and how to teach it to your little one. Yeah, I think it should be in the group for you to access to watch later on too. So, does anyone have any questions? Anyone that's watching right now? Let's see. Your 1-year-old co-sleeps and nurses about 6 times per night. How do I get her to sleep longer? Oh. So that's a tricky one. Sorry. Should I transition her to a crib? So no, I would recommend, yes, to a crib. That's totally up to you. We typically only work with families who don't co-sleep just because we follow the American Pediatric Society's safe sleep guidelines. You absolutely have not ruined her. It's never too late to start teaching them some self-soothing skills. Don't play into the mommy guilt. You're doing the best you can. Sleep is so important, and it's so hard when you're not getting it to think straight. So just do what you can. We're here to help. If you wanna recruit a consultant to walk you through and guide your family through the process, we're more than happy to do that. The main thing with getting them sleeping on their own and not waking at night, usually if they're waking repeatedly and you're feeding them to sleep, this was my problem with my youngest. He woke up many times at night, and so I would just nurse him and he would fall back asleep, and I'd put him back in his crib, and then we'd start all over again in an hour or 2 at the most. So the problem with that is that they don't have the skills to put themselves to sleep. He was using me to put him to sleep. So then everyone transitions through 3 stages of sleep in each sleep cycle. So the first stage is really light, stage 2 is a little bit deeper, and stage 3 is really deep. And then we go through REM, which is an active, restless stage of sleep. And then we have a really brief wake, and if everything's good, we're just transitioning seamlessly into another sleep cycle. And so a baby who relies on a sleep prop, or nurses to sleep, or rocks to sleep, or it can be anything, doesn't have those skills to get back to sleep when they've had one of those wakes in the night or during naps. So that's why it's really important to help them, to give them those independent skills of sleep so that they can put themselves to sleep in between. Sorry, there's lots popping up here now. The toddlers can be really tricky. They really thrive with a consistent environment. So it's really important to set some firm boundaries when it comes to sleep with them. It's really, really important. I see that you're doing a routine. That's really wonderful. A routine is a really important component for everyone's sleep, really. We all use one without, whether we know it or not. As adults, we probably go through the same sequence of events at night when we're getting ready for bed. And then it's really important for our kids too, because we're making a lot of the decisions for them. So if we're doing a consistent routine where they're able to predict the next step, it makes them feel safe and secure because they know what to expect. And so the routine is going to help because it's going to cue their bodies that sleep is around the corner so they can start gearing down for that. We also have a toddler routine chart on our website that you can use. Sometimes that's helpful just to keep the routine on track because little ones are experts at prolonging them. Yeah, so it's tough to answer some of the method questions in the live chat because that's where if we had worked together we would spend a lot of time getting all the specifics of your situation and your family and your child and all that in order to make the recommendations. So that's something that if you would like support, I'm happy to. Otherwise, there are lots of different methods that you can use. There's some that you don't require a lot of support from the parent. There are some that the parent stays right beside in a chair or beside the crib or the bed or that sort of thing and then eases their way out of the room so that they can feel that support. And there's some kind of in-between methods where you leave and then come back and check. But it's with whatever method you use, the main thing is that you're staying consistent with it so that they learn what to expect. All right, I think we're just about out of time here. If there's anything else really quick, I can try and answer that for you. If you want to, I had mentioned my Facebook page. You can check that out. I try to post different tips and advice periodically or regularly that might be helpful. It's Alicia Dedora, Certified Child Sleep Consultant. And then the SleepWell Baby website is where you find that journal with all the different articles. There's pretty much an article for any sleep struggle that you might be going through. You can just search it into the search bar and hopefully something will pop up there for you. Transitioning to naps at daycare for a 4-month-old. What particularly are you wondering about that? I would recommend you can start a routine by that point. So if you have a routine for them, if you can get daycare to try and do a similar routine, that can be helpful. Just so it's a familiar routine. At 4 months old, if they're no longer being swaddled, a sleep sack is a really great item to have in the routine. because it's easy to pack, and it'll smell like home if they're using it at home too, and it's a really good safe sleep item, because then you know that they're warm, but they're not having extra bulky blankets in there. And then with the routine, and then I would recommend like around that 2-hour awake period for naps. And yeah, the nap time routine is going to be pretty brief, just a few minutes, but if they're doing it the same as you've been doing it at home, it might help. Not sure if that answers it, hopefully. Alright, well, I want to thank everyone that tuned in. Hopefully you're leaving with some tips that you can implement and will lead to a little more rest for you and your family. So, sleep well.